I went through 186 pitches before I could land my first investor. Just put that in context. I was rejected 185 times before I was able to raise money.
കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷം ഓഗസ്റ്റിലാണെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു 100 കോടി രൂപയുടെ ഫണ്ട് റേസ് ചെയ്തു. ഇന്ത്യൻ സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പുകളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് പറയുകയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അതൊരു വലിയൊരു എമൗണ്ട് ആണ് ഒരു സ്റ്റേജിൽ. അതെങ്ങനെ ഫണ്ട് റേസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റി? ഫണ്ട് റേസിംഗ് ജേർണി എങ്ങനെയാണ്? പുതിയ സംരംഭകർ എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് ശ്രദ്ധിക്കേണ്ടത്? എന്തൊക്കെയാണ്
ഈ ഭാഗമാണ് I was the most excited to talk about in this call, and this is what I wanted to. This is hopefully if there is one or two things you can take away from this conversation, I was hoping that be this part. ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഫണ്ട് റേസ് ചെയ്യാൻ നല്ല ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ആദ്യം we raised a series round for about 4 million, which we did not publicize because we were working stealth, if you may. ഞങ്ങൾ FDA clearance apply the R&D. We were not ready to go public with it. So we raised altogether a total of $17 million during the life cycle of the business. Aditya 4 million some of it came from, I would say, friends and family, I would say. There were a couple of people who were just extremely instrumental in helping me with that raise. And mostly based on my experience at Invisalign, and a lot based on trust and alignment with the vision that we are creating. So raising the first 1 million was extremely difficult. Raising the next 3 million was not that difficult. Raising 13 million was extremely difficult. So I went through phases where you had this ebb, like ഒരു ebb and flow. You went through phases where none of this was easy. It was all varying degrees of difficulty. One was very difficult, the other was less difficult. So I'll give you a couple of numbers. എനിക്ക് ആദ്യത്തെ നമ്മുടെ ഈ $13 million investor, I'll just focus on Series A, which is where what's the closest to what we did in the fundraising journey. I went through 186 pitches before I could land my first investor. Just put that in context. I was rejected 185 times before I was able to raise money. Appo you need to have adu aalugal aarum aa oru bhagam parayunne illa. Valappuram aalugal parayunna you always look at evolution as like people look around as like ivide manushan maathame ullu baakiyulla aalugal onnum parayulla vera you don't see Neanderthal, so they never existed. Or like you only talk about Facebook, you don't talk about Friendster. You don't talk about all these other companies that came before it that made Facebook possible. So one of the things that I do want to impress upon or to share with the audience is that you probably almost every success, and this is just cliche and common sense, but I'll just repeat it because common sense is somewhat uncommon. ഞാൻ 186 തവണ പിച്ച് ചെയ്ത് 185 തവണ ഫെയിൽ ചെയ്താണ്. രണ്ടാമത്തെ കാര്യം, once the first investor came along at the 186, I kept a scorecard. I was like, you know what, let me just count, because it'll be kind of at some point looking back in life, you can say, look at how bad I was in doing this. So I was, and then once the first investor came along, then there was a barrage of investors. That is another thing that I realized. ആദ്യം ബെറ്റ് വെക്കുന്ന ആള് കിട്ടാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടാണ്. ഫോളോവേഴ്സിനെ കിട്ടാൻ വളരെ compared to the first person who places the bet, easy. Once we had a term sheet from one lead investor at 8 all of a sudden. And then I was able to raise this we raised 13, but we raised it at a very decent valuation. So we did not have to, it was very good for our shareholders and our employees, because we want to make sure that we are creating value for this for our shareholders and our employees, because like I said, it's a labor of love. So perseverance is so important. And ഈ ഒരു ജേർണിയിൽ നമ്മൾ പോകുമ്പോൾ എല്ലാം you're going to talk to very smart people. I was pitching to like very famous people, and there's no VC in the valley, or there are very few VCs in the valley that I've been talked to. Valley as in like Silicon Valley. I live in San Francisco. അപ്പോൾ അവരൊക്കെ they will give you advice, but one thing you have to remember is Look at Theranos, for example. Theranos is kind of like a classic story where a lot of smart people did a very dumb thing because they did not know a lick about lab testing they did not know anything about blood testing. They're all smart people. They're like, the smartest people, but they were dumb when it came to blood testing. Same thing goes for the innovation that you're working on in your company. You know it the best. Just because, like Reid Hoffman said so, or, Mark Andreessen said so. You don't change. You definitely listen to them. Listen with a lot of humility, always, because sometimes these are all really smart, wise people. But always apply your own point of view in terms of how much you know the industry, how much you know the customer, and then always go after what you feel is a good combination of these things, as opposed to just blindly listening to someone because that person has a brand name and that person is someone you respect. So Adana, staying true to that part while giving respect to others' viewpoints is one thing that I also want to share, because I see a lot of people here going, I'm also a startup advisor. I sit on the board of Kairos Society, which is one of the largest advisory platforms for university students. I see, like, I get whiplash. ഒരു ദിവസം ഒരു കൺസ്യൂമർ ടെക് കമ്പനിയാണ്, പിറ്റേ ദിവസം അത് കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് മാറിയിട്ട് ഒരു വെയറബിൾ കമ്പനിയാകുന്നു, അതിന് പിറ്റേ ദിവസം അത് ഒരു മെഡ് ഡിവൈസ് ബില്ലിംഗ് സൊല്യൂഷൻ ആകുന്നു. ഇത് ഒരു ദിവസം കമ്പനി ആനയാടും തമ്മിൽ ഒരു ബന്ധമില്ലാത്ത കമ്പനികളാണ് ഇതൊക്കെ സംഭവിക്കുന്നത്. ആരോടോ ഇവർ സംസാരിച്ചു, ഓരോരോ ഇതാണിതെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അവർ ഉടനെ അത് ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്തു. And this happens with a lot of early stage founders. We're filled with doubt, right? We are not as confident as we appear outwardly. You have an innate sense of skepticism, and you need it. You cannot be just drinking your own Kool-Aid too much. At that time, you should not make that your weakness either. The second part of what I want to share is, do listen, but don't blindly be a slave of somebody else's vision. Do only things that make sense because it aligns with your viewpoint of the market and the customer. So I wanted to share as my biggest takeaways. And also, the last thing is, do network, because everything is people buy from people they trust. Do network, and I know Zoom, the culture of the pandemic makes it a bit more difficult. But do your best. And the last part is, I wanted to leave this on a very optimistic, positive note. There's a lot of capital out there, You just need to find the right investor who's looking for a thesis similar to yours. And there's no other way to get to that investor rather than just going out and trying and then trying some more.